Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. We're here in Barcelona today with the brand new Seat Tarraco. We first had the option to look at this in preview only a couple of months ago. And if you check the comments below, you can find out what we thought of it back then. Well, today, we're finally having the opportunity to give it a drive and find out if its driving matches up with its new looks. Let's take a closer look. The first and most important question that Seat has to answer with the Tarraco is bluntly, what is the point? It's following on the heels of its extremely successful smaller siblings, but this is Seat's first entry into the larger seven-seater SUV market, a market that's already very well served within brand at the luxury end by Audi and at the more budget-focused end by the Skoda Kodiaq. And that has already been very well received and, incidentally, is based on exactly the same platform as this car. So, you might well ask, what is the Volkswagen Group doing introducing its own brand competitor? Well, to start with, Seat are very distinctly passionate about saying that they have a completely unique offering to bring into this segment. Their answer is, it's the same high build quality, high materials, but it's sportier, it's more sexy, it's more youthful. Well, okay, the first place to start talking about those things is, of course, the design language. Now, if you had the chance to watch our static preview, you will already have a very clear sense of how this design aesthetic is so important to Seat. If not, let's have a quick look at it. Now, the first thing to mention is this is the first of the new Seat vehicles that features this design language. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be seeing a lot more of this style over the next couple of years. So let's take a bit of a closer look so we can see what's changed. Well, the first thing to mention is that obviously if you're going to design a larger SUV, it needs a lot more road presence than the smaller cars that Seat are so popular for. Take a look at the angularity featured within this headlamp. Now, Holger, I think, might take a little bit of a cutaway there so you can really see in detail just how much angularity there is in this lighting design. That's a newer, more aggressive look for Seat. That kind of works right throughout the grille. If you see here, we do have a very large presence because this is a larger SUV, but you can imagine these features being condensed down to work well with Seat's smaller offerings as well. In that regard, this car is always going to be a little bit of a compromise because you need a design language that will work right across the estate, but at the same time still gives you that athletic, muscular presence you want from the larger SUV. And I think they've done a pretty nice job. I like the way that this angularity has been built in right throughout the design. This grille is bold, but it's not too bold, so I'm not going to be disappointed seeing this echoed on smaller cars. The bonnet scoops you up from the front that says, I'm athletic, but I'm not going to get carried away with my own size. So, a much more angular design, a little bit more aggressive, I would say a lot more stylized in terms of its design. What do you think? 4.74 meters in length or 187 inches. That is just slightly longer than its brother, the Skoda Kodiaq. I'm interested to see how, if at all, that affects its driving characteristics. What I particularly like from the side aesthetic of the vehicle is that we can still see those nice, unique, particular touches that make this a Seat. Look at these angular mirrors, for example. There are some nice rugged elements as well to the design that let you know that this is sort of an off-road vehicle. Not least we have plastic trim down here and a plastic finish underneath this door mirror. And although they don't make it look really rugged, they do blend in nicely with this paint, which is called camouflage, by the way, if you like it. It does blend nicely to give you a car that's finished overall that still looks stylish while you're driving throughout town, but you could also imagine taking into the middle of a muddy field. Now, I've always found the side of SUVs to be a particularly challenging piece of design. You need still to have that bold presence on the road, but at the same time they have to look stylish because nobody wants to drive around town in a tractor. Seat have done that nicely by keeping the overall dimensions visually of the car fairly low. We have this big bold bottom panel here and a really nice shoulder accent line that cuts right the way from the front of the car and right the way through into the rear lights. What that achieves for us visually is it compacts down the height of the car, making it look a lot lower than it actually is. But saying that, it's still lower than a lot of its competitors, so you're not going to feel that you're overwhelmed while you're driving this around town. I think the matching of colours and the balance of this height gets it about right. If I have one criticism, I would say that it isn't necessarily visually distinctive enough on the side to really make a unique statement. But you know what? That's not always a bad thing. Our test car has the largest wheels that are available, and they are 20 inches in diameter. Now, there are obviously smaller wheels and they are cheaper if you're going to be buying them, but I think visually they work very well for the height. The overall height of the car is 1.67 m or about 66 inches, which is just a little bit lower than some of its big competitors. Personally, I like that. I think it really adds to the aesthetic, and when combined with these larger wheels, it really makes the car look dynamic and sporty. And as that's what Seat say they're trying to achieve with it, well, I'm excited to see if the drive lives up to the visual. At 1.84 m or 72 inches in width, I think the rear of this car is really going to divide a lot of opinion. Again, it's a very tricky design challenge because it is an SUV. We have to have this ground clearance at the bottom to make sure that we do have that off-road capacity that we want, but at the same time, there's no getting away from that massive back end. Now, with the reduced height slightly, it doesn't look so phenomenally large. And in the night time, you can't see so well right now, we have this light strip that goes right across the rear. And that's a throwback to some more expensive SUVs that really adds a nice style element. But you can't get away from it. I have a very distinct feeling that this is going to divide opinion. For what it's worth, I like the way all of this has been tied together visually, and it really does pull the car together. Sometimes, when you walk from the front round to the rear of a vehicle, you're left at the back thinking, what on earth happened there with the design? That is not the case with the Tarraco. I feel everything flows nicely together. But this is a major issue for a lot of our viewers. Have a look down here. Now, to me, although I got in a lot of trouble for saying this with you guys when I did over the static preview, this is not a fake exhaust. Why? Well, because you can clearly see that that's not what it is. And if you look under the car, the exhaust ports go straight down into the ground. But I understand that this is visually representative of that to a lot of people, and it can annoy a huge amount of auto fans because they like to be able to visually identify the exhaust and not have something there that looks as if it's referencing it. For my taste, this, for me, is an acceptable halfway house, because what we have is a suggestion, but I don't think this is trying to pass itself off as an exhaust. So stylistically, it works for me. But does it for you? I'm always interested to know. As it's been used practically, it forms a nice basis for some of these rear parking sensors that are integrated into the car. And I think visually it does help to tie everything together. We need something to distract from this massive midsection here, and I think Seat have done that quite nicely with this cross-hatching here, these, dare I say it, fake exhausts, and also the continuous line of these headlights. So a very difficult piece of design, but for my money, Seat have pulled this off. Let's take a look and see what's driving us around. Well, no gas struts, sadly, but plenty of nice engine for us to look at. At launch, we have the choice between 2 petrols or 3 diesel engines. What we have here is the larger of the 2 available petrol engines. So that is a 2-litre TSI, and it produces 190 horsepower. The smaller is a 1.5-litre TSI producing 150. If you want to go with one of the 3 diesels, they produce They're all 2-litre TDIs, and they produce anywhere from 150 to 190 horsepower. Now, that is the launch range. Later on, there will also be a hybrid engine, which Seat say will drive up to 50 kilometers on purely electric charge. So clearly that's going to have a nice impact on both the efficiency and the CO2 emissions. But we're going to have to wait for a little while longer to find out how that drives. Let's take a look inside. Well, at the moment, at the launch, the Tarraco is available in 2 trim levels. That's the Style on the bottom, or the Excellence, which is what we have here. Later on, there will be an FR trim level, which should accentuate the sportiness, but it won't be available from launch. So let's start with the key. Well, I think you can agree that's a fairly nondescript affair, but you know what? It is nice and light and easy in your pocket, and I do appreciate that compared with some of the larger keys that are out there. So let's take a look inside. Well, the first thing obviously to get a good look at is the door. I think this gives us a clear indication of how the Style is utilized right throughout the car. First thing to say about this, the use of materials is really nice. No car manufacturer has limitless budget to spend on trim, and it's always going to come down to how much money is available to make the car feel as nice as they want to. Look at this. Fake wood here, it looks really stylish, nice chrome trim, and I really like this material finish. It gives the car that slightly rugged feel, nice and contemporary, good and hard wearing, and it really matches nicely with the other soft touch materials throughout. So, a nice starting point. Now it's an SUV, so we should have that little bit of extra space. I always like to see a nice big front door pocket because I'm always going to have lots of things to put here. So that will take a good 1.5 litre bottle of water and plenty of other things beside. Having a look through, we can see that this is the Excellence trim because we have this footplate here gaining our way into entry to the vehicle, and it nicely presents these brand new seats. I really like this design. I think it matches very nicely to the door. Again, it looks modern, contemporary, stylish, but nice and hard wearing and a little bit rugged looking. That's what I want from an SUV design. So, right from the entry to the vehicle, we're already getting the impression that this is a little bit more stylish, a little bit more modern, and still nice and rugged. So great, let's get in and see if the rest of the cabin looks and feels just as good. Well, once we sit in the cabin, the first thing that we notice is how well the interior styling matches upon the promise of the door from the point of view of opening the car and everything looking and feeling right. So there is lots in here to like. The styling is very much distinctively Seat. So, okay, that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's pretty broadly popular and people like the way that Seat managed to get the best out of the money they have available to spend on materials. Certainly that's the experience of sitting in the car. The seat itself is very comfortable and supportive. It's not too much. Some SUVs feel a little bit overblown in the seating department. This feels just a little bit more dynamic and sporty. The road position is really good here. I'm sitting exactly where I want to be in the vehicle. Now, I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, but as regular viewers will know, I do have a particularly long torso and short legs. So that always makes my driving position look a little bit interesting. But what you can see here is I have plenty of available headroom. So for comparison, if you're anything up to about 6'1", 6'2", you should have more than enough space in this car. Higher than that, well, I think you're going to need a different car to begin with anyway. But still, let's talk more about the interior experience as Holger comes round and we can take a look in a bit more detail. Interior design is always going to come down to a balance between style and practicality. And with this being an SUV, practicality is always going to be my preference. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind. If there are some styling details of this car, and I think you can imagine what I'm going to be talking about, that maybe aren't exactly to your taste. I think the balance here is actually pretty good, and having put significant miles down on this car now, I can tell you that it all behaves very nicely when it actually comes together for the driving experience. But aesthetics still matter. You do, after all, have to look at this car and sit in it every single day. So let's talk about that. Well, we have a nice soft touch dashboard, and that looks and behaves extremely nicely. It just knocks anything visually right out of your view when you're driving. You keep your concentration fully on the road. And this is the important point, that is what I have come to appreciate about this. Visually, I think there couldn't be too many people who are really in love with the way that this presents, floating as it does above the dashboard. But I have to tell you, when you are driving in this car, it is exactly what you want, which it doesn't dominate your visual line at all, but it does provide you with the information you need, and it is actually pleasantly designed. Regular viewers may know I'm a big fan of buttons over anything digital, but these are nicely labeled and easy to access. So just to show you exactly what I'm talking about, let's start the car so we can bring that to life, and you can take a look at the information as it presents itself. Being a new car, and it's not a massively cheap one, the processors are actually relatively fast and pretty straightforward to access. It's just getting booted up, so let's give it a moment to do that. While it's doing that, I can show you this. We have a 10.25 display combined with an 8-inch display. They are standard across the range. They want to be full digital. Now that also, by the way, goes along with full LED lights right throughout the range as standard. Lighting and design, they wanted to keep consistent throughout all of the lines on this vehicle, and I think that's nice. You don't really want your customers to be buying a car and then feel like they're second class, so that's a good touch in my book. Now, here we can see, let's just go to the navigation screen. And by the way, I will tell you, in keeping, you can see we've actually got pretty decent reaction time there. The processor's nice. In keeping with almost every other car I can think of, I have to be honest, the stock navigation that comes through Google works a lot more intuitively than that comes with the processing chip on the car, but it does do a very effective job, so you don't always need your phone. And the way that your phone connects with this has been very much at the forefront of the design, so you not only have the standard stuff you'd expect, the Android Auto, the Apple CarPlay, but you also now have as an option the ability to get Alexa and Shazam. And obviously, as we become more integrated with our smartphones, it's nice that that connectivity is keeping pace. These features are really very straightforward. I like the split. It seems like an obvious thing to do, but in so many cars, that's on a menu or a sub-menu. Here I can immediately understand exactly what I'm looking for. Navigation is a flag, car information is a car, apps are here with the picture of the phone, and then different options for in-car apps are accessed here. It's all very intuitive and straightforward, and don't forget, a lot of that can be done directly through the steering wheel by speaking directly to the car. Why am I going to such lengths to tell you about all of these things? I only want to say that this, I suspect, is going to form the largest dislike in terms of the interior of this car. I would suggest to you that because it's so practical in its usage, it's not nearly necessarily as negative as a thing as you may think it is. A lot of people might love it, but already I'm seeing from reviews of our static review that this is not something people are crazy for, but it does work well with the driving experience. So don't write it off until you've tried it. Loving the regular analog, volume control and zooming in and out with this knob over here, which also works right throughout for other menus, is really straightforward and intuitive. So that's the positive on the entertainment system. The thing I'm not personally massively in love with is the driver's cockpit display over here. We can cycle through many different options. There are 3 different standard displays you can pick from. The one that you're used to, the one that looks a little bit like, I guess, an 80s perspective of a car digital display, and something that's a little bit of a compromise between the two. I like that there are lots of different options available to you. I strongly suspect most people are going to end up sticking with that one. We can cycle between many different bits of information that you can display in the center, and there are huge options to be had on all of them. All you have to do is scroll through the wheel on the steering wheel to select exactly what information you want, and then you're set to go. You can see it gives you some really nice data and a report on your drive. Now, I wanted to show you this because this is our fuel efficiency number. Now, we have switched this car off and reset it 3 times in total over our test drive to get an accurate figure. I don't think 11.5 is fair. The one we had from yesterday came to around about 10.5 and our longer term driving produced a figure of 9.5. So in mixed usage, I think a fair fuel consumption figure for this car is 9.5 litres for every 100 kilometres driven in mixed usage with reasonable driving. As with the door and the rest of the car, I'm really liking this material matching. This fake wood that we can see is nicely finished. It's not overdone. Nobody's going to look at that and think it's actually wood. But you know what? It's a nice textural surface and it's a good counterpoint to this soft touch dashboard. When you add into that these air vents here, you have a nice, stylish, straightforward looking system. Slightly further down, and we have an inductive charging pad down here. One thing I think Seat could have done, this is a very minor niggle, it's not hugely significant, but here we have obviously the key which doesn't need to go into ignition anymore. So where are you going to put this when you drive? Logically right there. Well, that's also where my phone is going to live, not least because of the inductive charging pad. There's not really a happy spot for my key to sit without kind of scratching the top of my phone. It's a very small thing, but in everyday use, I don't know, I might have liked something extra just for me to put the key on. We do have a 12-volt charging point. We also have the ability to plug in a 3.5mm headphone jack, or rather auxiliary in, 2 USB charging points. That's great. So one for me, one for my passenger, and it's all a very straightforward layout. Slightly further back, this gear stick you will know from many different models. This is a 7-speed DSG. It's very easy to use. It feels great in the hand and is completely intuitive. It takes no time whatsoever to get used to. Now, across here, this is a really interesting feature. If I push on this, so to give you a sense of exactly how some of those camera angles can work, let's take a look here. This is the overview that you will get if you are in off-road mode with the camera modes selected, so you are able to pick between your views. And what you can see here is that I'm able to change the position of the car, which also changes the angle of vision that I have for the camera. And that, as you can imagine, is really nice, because if I am truly off-road, then there are lots of hidden obstacles that could be affecting me. This just allows me the opportunity to take a closer look. Now that's particularly nice if you happen to find yourself in the middle of a muddy field and you just don't really want to get out of the car and get your lovely evening suit covered in mud to find out if you're safe to drive. Slightly further back in the middle, we have, of course, more storage, a discreet cup holder area here, and a handy storage bin underneath the armrest. And there's plenty of space in there, as you can see, for everything that you standardly just want to throw something in the car and you're not quite sure where it lives. Let's take a look in the back and see what's happening there. Well, I think an SUV really does need to provide a good, comfortable rear seat experience. I'm liking the solid sound of that door shutting. First thing to mention, I think maybe most significant, is that this seat in the front is set for me as the driver. I have, as I mentioned, very short legs. Why is that important? Well, we have kept this seat in Holger's position for the front, so you can get a very decent perspective on exactly how much legroom there is back here. But that said, in order to make the most use of that space, one of the nice features we have here in this car are these movable seats. And that presents a huge different range of alternatives depending on what you need store in the front, in the back even, or who is sitting up here. Now we have these plastic tray tables. We always talk a little bit about these things in terms of whether they deliver an experience that's actually worth having. And, well, I don't know, Holger. Looks to me like I might have managed to have put the tray table in an unrecoverable position. There is clearly a trick to getting this tray table into its next location. There we have it. And I do like the nice little features we have here. I mean, I think they're going to be much more suitable for children than adults, but that's nice to have a separate cup holder. That's a nice snack tray. I don't know realistically if you're going to be able to fit a laptop in there if you are trying to do a little work on your way around. But you know what? I think it's a nice option to have at least. I'm liking the fact that we have a charge port back here. I think I might have been a bit happier if I had two, but we do have instead a 12-volt port, and obviously that's nice for larger accessories. We also have on this car our own heating and cooling functions, and heated seats as well. So really a very large amount of functionality. Now, happy to tell you, we have tether points not only on the rear seats, but also on the front seats. So we can fit 3 car seats into this car. Obviously, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but if you do, then we need to make sure that the safety bag on the front is deactivated, because that does not work with car seats. So, what's the experience like back here? Well, first thing to mention is we take full advantage of this large panoramic roof that we have on this car. That always makes a huge difference to your experience of being a backseat passenger, and that just helps on longer trips with children. Obviously, this is the 7-seat model. Why do I mention that? Well, I don't know. The middle seat anywhere in a back row is always a bit of a compromise. Realistically, how far are you going to want to travel like this? I'm going to say it's fine for children, but in terms of being a true 3-seat back seat, come on, I don't think you're going to want to spend too much time sitting here. It's not brilliantly comfortable. So 2 people in a lot of comfort, 3, not so much. And you can tell that based on the additional features we have back here for just standard 2 seats. We have additional cup holders here, a really nice, comfortable armrest, and that about does it for the second row. But you know what? We're not done. What is this? I'm sensing a secret compartment, Holger. Do you think I've missed something here? Or is this just a design detail? Nope, I think it's just a design detail. We'll get on to more of that when we fold the seat, possibly. Yes, okay, well this is where we're gonna fit our skis to go straight through. So nice to see that we have the ability to be able to fully access the rear whilst we have 2 passengers in it. And that obviously is a nice SUV touch. You don't get that in a standard car. Well, that's the second row, but this is a 7-seat vehicle. So here comes the magic question. Can you actually fit 7 people in it? Let's go take a look. You can get the Tarraco with 5 or 7 seats, and if you want to go with 7, that is going to cost you 60 litres of load space. So the maximum load space you can have in the boot, 760 litres. If you go with 7 seats, that then cuts down to 700. Well, take a look. Do you really need more than 700 standard litres of load? I don't think so. Don't forget, if you do slide those benches forwards, Holger's going to stay there while I come around and do just that. So you can get a sense of just quite how much available space we're talking about. Now that's with the seat still up. There is now absolutely no leg room whatsoever behind Holger, so that wouldn't allow us to put a person behind him, but you can really get a sense of the flexibility of this car. That is more than enough room. So I'm saying absolutely you're going to want to go with the 7 seats. But can we fit human beings back here? Well, let's find out. If I lift this up, okay, that releases one of our seating options. Now, before I get back there and sit in, let's take a look and see what else is back here. Well, this is a really nice designed and thought out space for the parcel shelf to go. Obviously, if you're not using those seats, which most of the time in a 7-seat car, I have to say you're not going to be. Why would I say that? Well, if you're a family that needs 7 seats, you're not likely to be going with this vehicle. This is an afterthought for extra people who are not standardly back here. So then ordinarily, you would have your parcel shelf in place. It's always a bothersome feature as to where you're going to store it when it's not being used. That's a really nice piece of design, I think. If I can take that out, you can see underneath, we have the spare tyre. And look at this, hooray! Finally, somebody has figured out a way of integrating equipment into the spare tyre well without removing the spare tyre. So well done, Seat, I appreciate that. Let's pop this back in here. That's pretty straightforward. And this shelf removes very easily. Does it go back quite as easily? Yeah, I think so. Okay, that feels good. So we have the seat up. Are you ready, Holger? Let's put both of them up and we'll see if we can draw the distinction between the two. So, the bench on the left in the second row is showing us exactly how it would be if it had passengers in it. And I'm going to sit back here. Yep. Okay, I don't think the word cozy quite does this justice. Now, this seat then, if you show Holger the amount of available knee space in front, you can see that this seat is configured that there would be no reason to ever have it set up like this, because although I now have leg space back here, I can't sit anyone here. So realistically, we are talking about this space here. Here I go. Okay, that is not possible. So what I want to know is, can we draw a compromise between what we had and the standard ride of the vehicle? Well, let me be fair, in case you think I'm being ridiculous with the back of this car. The only thing that I want to know with a third row of seats is, can I fit children back here? And could I, if I have to drop my friends off in town, just about squeeze adults in? Well, I have to say, that's a big solid yes to the children. And honestly, that's a pretty big fat no to the friends. I'm a pretty adaptable kind of a guy, and if somebody tells me there might be a chance of me getting a lift back from town on a Friday night, on the rare occasions I have the opportunity to go out, then I will fit into just about anything. But I have to tell you, that's pushing it a little bit far. I think I could just about do maybe a few miles in this if it was a real emergency. But realistically, this is for children. So that makes it perfectly accessible for families. Why am I laughing so much? Holger, I don't know if I'm ever getting out of here again, but I'm going to try. Let's see how easy it is.
Should I inform the fire department to cut you off?
Ah. So I will say that the accessibility from back here is actually great. And your kids are going to love it, because it's always nice for them to feel they have their own special space. Definitely think it's worth pointing out that we don't have tether points back here, so you can't put car seats back here. And the small children who would fit back here but need the car seats can't travel back here anyway. So there really is only fairly limited utility for these seats. But I still think I'd rather have the functionality available to me, just in case I have friends who are as crazy as me and just need that lift when they need it. So you've just driven into town and picked up your friends because you're that kind of a person, and you've managed to get all of your rear storage things into this fairly generous area that's still left back here, but now you want to put the seats away, be done, and go in for bed. How easy is that to do? That's really pretty straightforward, isn't it? You can fold them back down again, and before you know where you are, we are back to a 5-seat configuration. And there are some nice additional touches too. We have a fold-out hook here for shopping bags. Often a complaint with SUV or larger vehicles is that we have a lot of rolling around of our goods in the back. And some storage bins either side here that afford us just a little bit of extra space for clutter. And look at this, I always appreciate this touch. We also have a rear 12-volt charging socket, and that's particularly useful for when you take the thing on things like camping expeditions. Driving the most powerful of the two available petrol engines. That's a 2-litre TSI. It's kicking out 190 horsepower and 320 newton meters of torque. That power is being delivered to the wheels by a 7-speed DSG. This is all going to amount to giving us a 0 to 100 kilometers per hour time of about 8 seconds and a top speed of 211 kilometers per hour. So what does all of that amount to as far as the driving experience is concerned? Well, naturally, being the more powerful of the two available petrols, you expect this to be a little bit more peppy. And I'm pleased to tell you that it is. It's got a nice bit of get up and go to it. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is whereabouts we are and how we are filming at the moment. We've come just outside Barcelona because there are some really nice hilly, windy roads here, and in a bit that's going to give us the opportunity to see how this slightly lower SUV handles once we start putting it into those corners at some speed. Okay, so the first thing that I really want to talk about are the driving modes on this car. We have lots of different ones to select with, and they are all accessed through this dial just underneath the gear stick. As I cycle through them, I'm starting off in normal here, which means that I have a very sedate drive. Now, what's particularly interesting to me about this configuration on this car is that when you do put it into sport, what you find is that although we have a little bit more of an accent on the acceleration noise, it's still what I would describe as a very polite drive. And to be fair, that's what you would expect from an average SUV. So we have a nice little bit of extra pickup, but nothing crazy and insane. Now, as I come around the corner here, if memory serves me correctly, we have a nice, decent piece of straight, and that will afford me the chance to get up a decent bit of speed and show you what that acceleration looks like. But for now, we're just coming into a little bit of a speed restricted area. We're up in the hills around Barcelona. It makes for some really nice driving, but of course, safety always comes first. They've put in rather a lot more safety features since when we were last driving here. So, there we go. Have to watch out for those rumble strips now, and plenty of other traffic coming in the other direction. While we're in this slightly slower area, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about the driving experience. As the passenger experiences it, Holger told me earlier that the seat's extremely comfortable. I really like the way that the styling works in this car, especially from the seats point of view. So it's very pleasing to find that once you actually start driving it, they're delivering lots in the way of comfort as well. Okay, so a bit more open road here. Let's give the car a little bit more power. And now, I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera, but what's extremely pleasing about the drive here is that you are getting much less roll into those corners. And that does make the drive feel a lot more dynamic. The steering is really quite precise, and the acceleration, whilst by no means being crazy, does afford you the opportunity to get the most fun out of these bends and driving around this environment. I think, as in common with all SUVs, the important thing to remember is this is not a sports car. The standard against which we are judging this car is, can it still produce a fun drive whilst offering you all of the amenities and everything you expect from an SUV? And in that regard, I would have to say, thumbs up, Seat, nice work. This is definitely a fun SUV. I think this affords us a really good chance to talk about those driving modes a little bit more. Now, obviously in different cars and different car types, driving modes make a huge amount of difference. In this car, we have four-wheel drive, and what that means is that the driving modes, in my experience, are best suited towards providing you different options for traction. Yes, there is a sports mode, but mostly that changes only the note that you're experiencing, and it makes things feel a little bit more peppy. But to be honest, average, normal, everyday driving is completely well served by the normal mode. Now, there is an eco mode. Putting it bluntly, if you bought an SUV with the most powerful petrol engine, I'm not entirely sure what it is you'd be doing with that. But okay, it's a nice feature to have if you want to try it out at least. The modes that really make for the most sense in an SUV are, of course, the traction and off-road modes. And I have had the pleasure of trying the snow mode, not in this particular car, but on another Volkswagen Group car. And I can tell you, it is excellent. It's a really nice piece of engineering and really does exactly what you would want it to do. Now, you might not need that mode more than once a year, maybe even once every other year, but what I can tell you is when you do need it, it's worth every penny. The same applies to the off-road mode. You might think, well, come on, okay, I like an SUV, but am I ever going to take it off-road realistically? Again, the nice thing is you find yourself driving onto a bit of sand that looks okay, only just off the road, or onto a field for a festival that looks fine. You're really going to appreciate that feature when you need it, because trust me, keeping the revs in the right place and getting the best out of the traction makes all the difference in the world between you getting on your way home and you spending the night sleeping in a field. And having done it, I can assure you, it's much nicer to have the option not to. Well, we've seen that the car drives nicely around challenging, windy, hilly roads, but how much of your average drive is that going to consist of? If you're like me, really not that much. So I think the most important feature about what this SUV can deliver for most people is how it drives in the day-to-day. And for that, we need a standard bit of lovely Spanish road. Well, as nice as all those bells and whistles for off-road driving are, The rise and fall of any SUV is going to come down to how well it performs in everyday activity. Well, we're about to get into the main road system around Barcelona. That's sports mode right up to 90 kilometers per hour, but now there's two things about that aren't quite fair. One, we had a downhill, and two, I was having a rolling start. So I don't think I'm going to be able to quite get down to zero, but it's Friday afternoon. That's the perfect time to think about this. It's time to go home. You've had a long week at work. You found yourself a little bit of open road, and you want to find out what the car's acceleration is like. I'm going 60, and that's not a bad bit of mid-range acceleration, I think. That's more than sufficient to do what we're going to want to achieve with this car. Now we're around regular roads and we're driving back into the centre of Barcelona, I think is a great time to talk about the everyday driving experience of this car. So, first thing, driving position. Well, come on guys, it's an SUV. What would you expect? You sit nice and high in the road, but you're still contained within the vehicle. The seats do a really good job of putting you exactly where you want to be. And it's always a slight concern with SUV design that massive B-pillars are going to limit your visibility. Well, I can tell you in this car, we've got really good all-round visibility. The mirrors are doing a really nice job of making sure that my road position is exactly where I want it and I know exactly what's happening around me. I really appreciate that. Steering wheel is a pleasure to use. These controls, well, I think a little bit of needing to get used to them is probably the case here, but they feel nice and tactile underneath my hands. I know where everything is and it's easy to control. One of the features I was a little bit concerned about before we had a drive was this central infotainment screen. Well, I can tell you, it's great while you're driving. Yes, the high gloss finish could be a little bit more subdued. Yes, I am going to get a little bit of a nagging irritation about my greasy fingerprints I can see in the display, but it does a good job of nice contrast and balance, which means I get the information I want without being bothered by this unit. As is always the case, I love these analog heating and cooling dials. They really allow me to just change what I want without needing to think about it. The visual display works well as well. I have all of the driver's information that I want in the cockpit, and although aesthetically I can't say I'm in love with the white and red contrast of the display, it does a really nice job of giving me that information in a clear to absorb manner without irritating me or giving me any more information than I actually need when I'm driving. Acceleration's great. As I said earlier, I really don't think that you need to worry about sports mode most of the time. Normal is fine, and most important for this car, cruising around in it is a very comfortable experience. We've now put a fair number of miles into this vehicle, and so far, how's your back holding up, Holger? Holger still looks happy, so I think that's a thumbs up.
Everything's fine.
Everything is good, he says. That's a thumbs up from both of us in terms of driver and passenger comfort. Really, I have everything I could want here. So, gearbox, yeah, it's good. I would say that the gearbox experience is the same as the engine. It's not outstanding in any respect, but it's good. It delivers nicely. Driver assistance systems, a bit of a niggle from me. I'm not in love with the lane warning system that pulls at your steering if you're going somewhere that the system isn't quite happy with. Could be a little bit more refined, I think, but that is something that you get used to really very quickly once you own the car. So I certainly wouldn't find that an off-putting feature. In sum, I have all the power I need. I have all the comfort I need. I have all the styling I need. So, is there anything missing from this experience? No, but is there anything that's blowing me out of the water at the same time? Also no. Am I expecting too much from this car? I think so. Let's look at it as a total thing, and I can honestly tell you that it delivers everything I want. Does it give me a little extra? Maybe not, but you know what? Designing an SUV that gives me a great experience of fun when I'm on the road, a good solid experience when I'm off the road, and a nice, safe, comfortable everyday drive, well, that is an awful lot to ask from a car. And I can honestly tell you that this one, the Tarraco, delivers. We started this clip with a question, and that question was, what is the point of the Tarraco? Well, I think we're a little bit clearer now. If you go on Seat's website, you can see their marketing for this car. And the central piece of that is a film where they show an older man and an older woman trying out things for the first time. So doing something a little new and a little different. And when you see the family lineup of SUVs that Seat offer, it is undoubtedly now complete. Well, there's a bit of a danger of that backfiring though. In my experience, older people do not like to be told that they're older. They like to identify with younger people, but they don't like to be told that they're doing it. This represents a bit of a paradox with this car. If you want a 7-seat Seat already brilliantly solved that. It's the Alhambra. It's a fantastic car. It does everything you could need, but it's not an SUV, and that is unquestionably where the market is going. Want a 7-seat SUV? Well, we have multiple luxury options. And if you're looking a little bit further down the price range, you can find an excellent 7-seat SUV in the Škoda Kodiaq. So, does this car make sense? Well, if you look at Seat's lineup, yes, it makes perfect sense. And I would suggest that the perfect customer for this car is somebody who either already very much identifies with Seat and only wants a large SUV produced by them, or somebody who likes the Seat styling and is looking for something that is going to be in keeping with that. The family is now complete. However, in terms of what it delivers, well, at a price point that starts from a little below 30, and as we have it here with the 2-litre petrol in the Excellence lineup, we're starting out at a price that is just under 44,000 euro. It isn't going to be enough of an argument to take you away from what's already available, so you do need something a little extra. Seat's response to that is to tell you, yes, but this is sexier, it's sportier, it's faster. There's no denying the looks are nice. There's also no denying the complete package is nicely put together. The handling is good. If I had to pick one word to describe it, it would unquestionably be polite. This is an SUV that is unquestionably happiest when driving around town without putting on too much crazy sporty driving. So everything here is good. And if it wasn't for the Kodiaq, I might even say that this car was great. But I think in sum, if you're the kind of person who loves Seat, you're really going to like this car. If you are somebody who really is looking for a 7-seater with ample space, you really should be looking at the Alhambra. And if you're somebody who just really desperately wants a 7-seat SUV and price is key, you really should be looking at the Kodiaq. But given that this is a Seat, I think there is plenty here to like. And I strongly recommend that if you are in the market for a 7 SUV, you take this one out for a drive as well as its competitors. I promise you it will hold up very nicely indeed. Did it deliver enough to justify itself in its own right? Well, I just didn't find the spark that I was hoping to look for. But you know, there's still a hybrid model to come later on. And who knows, maybe even a Cupra after that. What do you think? Please let us know in the comments below. If you have any questions on anything that I didn't touch on, please put them down there. Please subscribe. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as we enjoyed making it, and we hope we'll see you again soon.